In a significant shift in the global financial landscape, some BRICS nations are actively reducing their reliance on the US dollar in international trade. While not a unified movement across all BRICS members, this de-dollarization trend could have profound geopolitical and economic implications. Here's a closer look at the dynamics shaping this development. Over the past few years, headlines have increasingly highlighted the trend of countries moving away from the US dollar. While some reports may exaggerate the pace or impact of this shift, there's a solid foundation of truth behind these developments. Understanding the motivations and implications of these moves reveals a significant transformation in the global financial landscape. The US dollar has long held the position of the world's dominant international currency. This status grants the United States enormous leverage over global trade and finance, allowing it to impose powerful economic sanctions on countries it opposes. While this dominance has been an asset for the US, it has also led to growing frustration among other nations. Increasingly, these nations are exploring alternatives to reduce their reliance on the dollar and challenge the US's financial hegemony. At the forefront of this movement are the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. However, the true driving forces behind this shift away from the dollar are Russia and China. Both nations are pushing for the development of independent international payment systems as a means of bypassing Western sanctions. To understand the implications of this movement, it's essential to first grasp the significance of the US dollar's status as the world's reserve currency. Most international trade transactions are conducted in US dollars, even when the trading nations are not directly involved with the US. Here's a snapshot of dollar dominance. 96% of trade invoicing in the Americas is in USD. 74% of trade invoicing in the Asia-Pacific region is in USD. 79% of global trade, excluding Europe, is settled in USD. The only exception to this dominance is Europe, where the euro prevails. Additionally, commodities like gold, oil, and natural gas are priced in USD, regardless of their origin or destination. For countries to participate in international trade, they must hold substantial reserves of US dollars. This system operates much like a mandatory currency exchange. Imagine visiting the US with Australian dollars. To buy anything, you'd first need to exchange your currency for USD. Similarly, countries need to maintain reserves of US dollars to ensure they can engage in global trade. This necessity creates a persistent demand for USD, reinforcing its dominance. But the dollar's power extends beyond trade. Nearly all USD transactions are cleared through US-based banks or financial institutions. This centralized system is the source of America's unparalleled financial leverage. If the US government decides to impose sanctions on a country, it can block transactions, disrupt trade, and effectively isolate that country from the global financial system. The US's ability to weaponize the dollar is clearly illustrated by its sanctions on Iran. These sanctions were primarily imposed in response to concerns over Iran's nuclear program, missile development, and alleged support for terrorism. In 2022, the US barred American institutions from processing dollar-denominated transactions involving Iran, effectively cutting the country off from the global dollar clearing network. This move had dramatic consequences for Iran's economy, particularly its vital oil exports. In 2012, US sanctions caused a steep decline in Iranian oil exports. After the 2015 nuclear deal temporarily lifted sanctions, exports rebounded, rising from 1 million barrels per day to over 2.5 million barrels per day by 2017. In 2018, the Trump administration reinstated sanctions, causing exports to plummet to just 330,000 barrels per day by late 2019. This example demonstrates the immense power the US wields as the world's reserve currency issuer. By controlling the dollar clearing system, the US can significantly influence the economies of nations around the world, often with just a few keystrokes. Over time, the US has grown increasingly reliant on financial sanctions as a geopolitical tool. In 1950, only 2 countries faced US sanctions. Today, that number has skyrocketed, reflecting the extent to which the US uses its financial system to advance its agenda. While effective in many cases, this approach has also fueled resentment and prompted nations to explore alternatives. Russia offers a more recent example of the U.S. leveraging its financial power. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the U.S. imposed heavy financial sanctions, cutting off Russian banks from USD transactions, freezing $300 billion in foreign currency reserves, and banning key Russian banks from the SWIFT international payment system. These measures were designed to cripple the Russian economy, and they had a significant impact. Russia's GDP contracted by 2.1% in 2022. However, Russia has demonstrated remarkable resilience. The country has been able to partially circumvent Western sanctions by deepening trade ties with China and India. For instance, over 90% of trade between Russia and China is now settled in Chinese yuan or Russian rubles. Russia has overtaken Saudi Arabia as China's largest oil supplier. Russian oil sales to India surged 22-fold in 2022, with over 90% of Russian oil now being purchased by either China or India. These trade relationships bypass the need for USD, enabling Russia to maintain a degree of economic stability despite sanctions. This shift highlights the growing importance of alternative trade systems among BRICS nations. In response to the challenges posed by USD dominance, BRICS nations have been developing alternative financial systems to reduce their reliance on the dollar. China's cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS, launched in 2015. CIPS facilitates yuan transactions and offers an alternative to SWIFT. Russia's SBFS, introduced in 2014, SBFS serves as Russia's own version of SWIFT, designed to circumvent sanctions. Increased gold reserves. BRICS nations have been stockpiling gold as a hedge against USD reliance. For example, China's central bank added 314 tons of gold to its reserves over a 17-month period, while Russia has significantly ramped up its gold purchases. These measures not only reduce dependence on the dollar, but also pave the way for a potential BRICS currency system. Such a system would provide BRICS nations with a shared trading asset, further insulating them from U.S. financial influence. At the recent BRICS summit in October 2024, the alliance expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE. During the summit, leaders discussed the development of BRICS Pay, a payment system designed to rival SWIFT. BRICS Pay would facilitate transactions in local currencies, allowing member nations to trade freely without fear of U.S. sanctions. While details about BRICS Pay are still emerging, the initiative underscores a broader effort to challenge the U.S.-led financial order. If successful, BRICS Pay could significantly reduce the dollar's influence in global trade and weaken its effectiveness as a geopolitical weapon. The expansion of BRICS highlights its increasing economic and geopolitical significance. BRICS now accounts for 37.3% of global GDP, compared to the G7's 29.9%. The bloc holds 44.35% of global oil reserves and contributes 38.3% of global industrial production. BRICS nations represent 45% of the global population, more than 4 times the population of the G7. Should BRICS nations unify under systems like BRICS Pay, they could dramatically shift the balance of global economic power. While the US dollar may retain its status as the world's reserve currency, its ability to enforce sanctions and influence global trade would be significantly diminished. The growing push by BRICS nations to reduce their reliance on the US dollar reflects a broader dissatisfaction with America's use of financial sanctions as a tool of control. While these nations still face challenges in building a fully independent financial system, their efforts signal a major shift in the global economic order. As BRICS nations expand their influence and develop alternatives to USD, the global dominance of the dollar may face unprecedented challenges. And that's the latest on today's top stories. What are your thoughts? If you'd like to dive deeper into any of these topics or explore related issues, feel free to leave a comment. Thank you for tuning in and spending your time with us. Stay informed, stay curious, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Recent reports suggest that China is considering leveraging its substantial holdings of U.S. Treasury securities, valued at approximately $1.3 trillion, as a countermeasure against U.S. sanctions. This strategy would involve China reducing its investments in U.S. debt, potentially impacting the U.S. economy by increasing borrowing costs and affecting financial markets. Historically, China has been one of the largest foreign holders of U.S. Treasury securities, using these investments to manage its currency value and maintain export competitiveness. However, amid escalating trade tensions and sanctions, Chinese officials have explored the possibility of offloading these assets to exert economic pressure on the United States. According to Finance Minister Lan Fong, the recently announced local government debt swap plan aims to mitigate economic risks and improve financial stability. Local governments will be allowed to borrow up to 6 trillion yuan, approximately $838 billion, over the next 3 years to refinance hidden debts, typically arising from high-risk financial platforms, a primary concern for China's economic stability. This program is part of a larger $1.4 trillion, 10 trillion yuan, debt swap initiative, with 6 trillion yuan allocated to replace hidden debts with local government bonds. Notably, for the first time since 2015, the local government debt ceiling has been raised. Additionally, local governments have access to a separate borrowing quota of 4 trillion yuan, $558 billion, to issue special bonds over the next 5 years.